Trojan fans. You get a little extra one on that one. This is try number 2. We did a live version of this. If you're listening to the podcast, it's try number 1. But for YouTube, our second try, I guess we had no audio the first time. Hopefully you guys can all hear us now. I'm your host, Ryan Abraham, joined alongside Mr. Triple Double himself, Connor Morrissette, helping us out. We had to scramble a little bit, so 5 minutes late. My apologies. We haven't done a show for like a week, or a couple weeks.
Let's talk some recruiting. I think that's how I started the false start one. So
yes,
here we go.
False start, 5-minute penalty. Yeah. Yes, we're going to talk a little recruiting. I thought we had a great intro, so I'll just do it right over again. USC has the numero uno class in 2026. Of course, it's late February. We'll see what happens in December, but some really good recruiting momentum going on with USC adding to the personnel department, including Chad Bowden, the new general manager, and some of the assistant coaches that recruit Southern California well. So we're going to get into all that. Connor wrote a couple stories about some of the returning, the highest graded players from Pro Football Focus on offense and defense from last year. We'll talk about some of the guys that are returning, a lot of guys that are gone. So we'll get into that. Maybe a little hoops. You got USC women's hoops going up, which is nice. They picked up a forfeit over Northwestern. Didn't come out here. I don't know if you know more about that. We'll talk about that. And then the men's team, not going in the right direction, in danger of not making the Big Ten tournament. So we'll talk about all that kind of stuff. If you have questions or comments for our show or any of the shows we do here on the Peristyle Podcast, podcast@uscfootball.com. That is our email address. Let us know which show you want to send it to. So if it's me and Connor, or the Triple Double Podcast, Talking Basketball, or the Composite 2-Star Recruits, any of those, you can send an email and let us know who it's for, and we will get it on the show for you. You can also call or text us. We got a voicemail today. Don't think we have any text today, but a voicemail from our buddy Curtis. 424-254-9141 is our voicemail number. And then, of course, on Apple Podcasts, we'd love to hear from you. We love you to get us reviews. So if you have the time, you can review the podcast, leave us a 5-star rating. We love those very much. We got one from Thack21. He says, love listening to you guys, especially during the season to get me through the work week. You guys do a great job on telling it how it is, and it's easy to tell the work you guys put in. Love seeing the updates on the boards as well. Fight on. Thanks, Thack. That was very nice.
That was very nice. Did they get a gift card?
That's a very good point, too. I do have a couple Trader Joe's gift cards left. Not many, but I got a couple. So, Thack, if you're out there, email me, ryan@uscfootball.com, and I will send you a Trader Joe's gift card thanks to our buddy John in Brea. And that's a good segue into Trader Joe's because, bam, I just had my lunch that was Trader Joe's heavy. I did had a friend over last night for dinner, and I caught some fish up in Canada over the summer. I thawed it out and made a crusted fish and chips. Wow. So potatoes I got at Trader Joe's, and all the seasoning and everything I got from Trader Joe's. My friend brought over a salad that she had made everything from Trader Joe's. She was telling me, like, yeah, all the stuff. It looked like one of the bag salads, but she actually put it together. It was good. And then she was telling me, I was telling her about Trader Joe's in the show, and she said her grandmother, who's 94, and I think it's her mom, takes her to the store like every week, and she only shops at Trader Joe's. I'm like, I'm going to say that on the show then. It was good. But a Trader Joe's heavy dinner last night, and then I had leftover lunch. It was pretty good. This is the best fish and chips I've made. Like, you have to soak the potatoes and then fry them once, dry them off, fry them again. And that way they come out pretty crispy, and it came out good. And the fish, I think I cut in good sticks like you would get fish and chips, and it came out really good. You put it in the hot oil. I've done air fryer stuff. There's no substitute for hot oil. So, but it was very yummy and Trader Joe's centric.
On the opposite side of the spectrum, I had some pizza from the Trader Joe's dough last night, and that dough is exceptional. You don't need a pizza oven to make it taste really good. You can put it in the regular oven. So that's my Trader Joe's contribution this week. Had some really good sausage and cheese and sauce, and I think some veggies, pizza my girlfriend made. It was really good. So shout out Trader Joe's.
Very nice. Your very real girlfriend.
Yes.
Unlike Chris's. No, I know Chris's girlfriend, Kristen, but I got to see, just to shout out. So if you guys we're both listening to the Composite 2-Star Recruits podcast right now. It's over 3 hours because they got a couple of big commitments. So we're kind of getting through that. We'll talk about those commitments in a second. So Chris Trevino, if you remember, like when our sites merged in 2017, Chris was, he's a very introverted person. He was never on podcasts or videos or anything like when you joined, you were like all on board, like every podcast you could do and videos and all that stuff. Chris, it took a little coaxing. He still hates his first appearance on this show, the Peristyle Podcast, but he's found his voice. He's very funny, and he's very comfortable doing all of these shows now. Well, he started taking improv classes, and he was part of an improv show down in Long Beach, and it was fun to kind of see him. I went to the show live. He was like the featured guest. It was a 15-year. It's Held Together, I believe, is the name of the troupe, and 15-year anniversary of them doing these shows. I think they do a show every Saturday. If you want to check it out, you're in the Long Beach area. But Chris was the special guest. He wrote a skit to start the show and then did a whole bunch of improv stuff. And just really quick, I thought he did an amazing job with the improv. They were different games and stuff. So shout out to Chris. I didn't hear him mentioning it on his show so far, but it was cool to go down and see him and stuff perform.
I'm sure the fans of our website and the show would want to hear about the next date that he does one of those, because I bet a lot of fans would come out for Chris and support one of his shows. So I'm looking forward to the next one, and I know you enjoyed this one, Ryan. And yeah, shout out to Chris. That improv stuff is awesome. He is really funny if you know him in real life, not just on the shows. He's funny on the shows too, but glad that you were there to support him. That was awesome.
Yeah, go check it out. He'll post when he's going to be out there next, but it's a very limited. I think there's only like 75 tickets, and they were like very reasonable. It was like $10 tickets and stuff. They had little raffles and everything, and it was cool. I had not been down there. I've been to a couple improv shows like Grunions, which they were kind of a feeder program for like Saturday Night Live and stuff. Wow. They're in LA. I don't know if you've been to that one, but it's pretty cool. But yeah, go check it out for Chris. We wanted to support him for sure, and he did an amazing job. So shout out to 18K Chris Trevino. If you guys remember, he went from like not wanting to go on a podcast or shoot an instant analysis video to getting his calf tattoo live on this program. So he's come a long way from not wanting to talk to literally being in a tattoo parlor, broadcasting live as he got his tattoo for 10K. If you haven't seen it, I mean, when he got the 10,000 Twitter followers, he said, if I get the 10,000 Twitter followers, I'm going to get a tattoo. And he did. And it says 10K on his calf, pretty big, but it looks like 18, so we call him 18K. So it's been a joke. Now he's like 30,000 followers, whatever. But cool. All right. That's a long intro there.
Shout out to Chris, man. No, I love it.
Yeah, shout out to Chris stuff. So big news in the world of USC football recruiting. Last couple of shows, we talked about some of the personnel staff that USC had added and some of the assistant coaches we got to hear from that have good Southern California ties, and all of a sudden, like, okay, like recruiting seems to have stepped up. Like I said earlier, USC has the number 1 ranked recruiting class for 2026 and got a flip from Oregon in the 4-star/5-star quarterback Jonas Williams, and then who's out of Illinois, but then local kid from Rancho Santa Margarita, 4-star defensive lineman, plays edge, but probably can get bigger. Simote Katoanga. Okay. I want to make sure I say it right. But a couple of big commitments. We can start with the quarterback first if you want and kind of give your thoughts on Jonas Williams.
Sure. So, yeah, USC gets him to flip from Oregon on Friday, I think, a little later in the day, and then Simote Katoanga, that was on Sunday morning. And if you subscribe to our site, you would have gotten all those updates instantly as they happened. Our staff did a great job covering those recruitments. But, yeah, with Jonas Williams, I listened to some of the 2-star podcasts like you did, Ryan, and I did that reaction video with Chris right when it happened. Let's just say it like it is. He looks a little bit like Caleb Williams when you turn that tape on. Very elusive, more of a scrambler than a runner, but big arm, can make a lot of those great throws. Hopefully we'll have a chance to watch him in person if he comes out for an Elite 11 or something like that. So the film, he definitely pops, and it's really exciting. And I think this is the first Chad Bowden domino to fall. I'm sure Lincoln Riley, if Bowden wasn't here, probably could have gotten Jonas Williams to flip too, but the relationship with Chad Bowden that Williams had was significant, and then the relationship that Simote Katoanga had with Chad Bowden was significant as well. Notre Dame felt like they had a good shot of landing him, and I know their board was all upset when he ended up committing to USC. So long way to go, like you said, but having the number one class is always a good thing, regardless of when the date is on the calendar. You'd prefer to have it in December, so we'll see if USC can hang on to it. But I feel like the staff is doing a nice job right now, and these two most recent commitments, I should say, I think have a lot to do with Chad Bowden. So you're seeing USC hire the general manager that everyone wanted, and now you're seeing the effects of that. So very impressive.
Yeah, it was really impressive. Oregon has done so well recruiting, and obviously they have the NIL machine going. We'll get into USC's NIL stuff in a little bit because they've had a new campaign out and everything. We'll talk about that. But for Jonas Williams, I mean, a quarterback that could be USC's future guy, signal caller back there. So it's one of those things where you identify the guy you want. I mean, it's USC's in a weird spot. They bring in Hassan Longstreet, and he's highly ranked 5-star kind of guy, and you get another guy, and then Ryder Lyons could be a next guy who's going to he's going to take a red shirt because of his Mormon mission, but that's someone that everyone thought USC would get in the 2026 class. So the whole recruiting for quarterbacks is interesting. I know guys transfer a lot, but you need to bring in studs, and if one stud doesn't work, you want to have another stud there to kind of pick up the pieces and take over. So this is a big one for me to get him, especially a guy that was committed to Oregon.
There are examples, but you usually don't bring in two studs in the same class at quarterback. And Ryder Lyons, he's a little different with that mission, but usually it's like the high-end guy, and then you take a flyer on someone else and you see what you have. But of course, there are exceptions. So the rule in USC will continue to recruit Ryder Lyons. I got a lot of flack, Ryan, on the instant reaction to the Jonas Williams commitment video on YouTube for saying that I felt like this negatively affected Ryder Lyons' chances of going to USC. I don't rule out USC landing him. His brother's on the team. He's been to USC a million times. That's not out of the question, but I do sort of find it hard to believe that he would want to be in the same class as another really talented quarterback, and maybe he's that doesn't matter to him, but I just think the way everything is set up now in college football, if you're one of those top 8 and maybe even top 5 quarterbacks in a given class, it's just rare for you to go into the same recruiting class as someone else. And I know, again, Ryder is taking that mission, so that changes things a little bit. His brother's on the team. I'm not ruling it out, but based on people I've talked to from other schools and stuff, it just seems like the logical next step would be that this is going to be USC's quarterback, and they'll continue to recruit Ryder Lyons, but I sort of feel like he'll go somewhere else now. So we'll see what happens, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's really a good thing to have a quarterback in the mix who will be ready to go in his recruiting year, so he'll be on campus in 2026, and you just want to stack good quarterbacks, and having one guy every class is good. Of course, if you were to get Lyons, that would be a good thing too, but I don't necessarily know if you totally need him. That's just so far away, looking at him potentially starting in 2027. I don't even think that makes a lot of sense if he had an 18-month mission and then has to come back to campus and get into things during that fall camp period, and miss the spring. So then you're looking at 2028. I like what USC did. They got a proven talent in Jonas Williams to come in and compete with Hassan Longstreet in the future. And to me, that's enough. I don't know why everyone's getting so bogged down with the Ryder Lyons. Will he come? Will he not come? Yes, they put in a lot of time with him, but they just got another really good quarterback, and I think that's a win.
Yeah, for sure. Gerard likes to say a bird in the hand, two in the bush. I mean, what happened with the Juju Lewis stuff for so long, and then he wasn't, really locked up, and he wasn't, recruiting and all that stuff, and then go get the guy you need. And I think they got a late, an ad and got Hassan Longstreet from Texas A&M. But in this case, you flip it from somebody else. You get your guy early, and then kind of go from there. You could add another piece. I mean, there might be movement at the roster after spring ball. We've seen that happen, right? So what if one of those guys transfers out? I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into it, but I think you'd much rather get the guy that's a 2026 guy right now. And, he's someone that probably wouldn't play until 2028. So you might get him on the roster too. So there's a lot of options there. We'll see. I mean, he might want to just come play with his brother. He may end up at BYU. He might go to Oregon and they flip. Who knows?
And the whole thing with I just don't even like projecting out to 2028. I know I did that in my last point, but we know how this works. Who the hell knows who the quarterback could be someone who we don't even know about right now. The fact that everything changes, like the
some
way
transfer that you haven't even heard
of. So to what Gerard says, it's good to just lock down the known commodity right now and get the guy who wants to be a part of the class right now. I give USC credit, because in the past, what would they do? What would Lincoln Riley do? They'd fixate on one guy, and if they didn't get that quarterback, there would maybe be a switch in the recruiting strategy after the fact that player chose someone else. But USC said, no, we're going to not wait for Rider Lions. We're going to be the aggressor. We're going to pursue a different quarterback who we really like, and I think that shows growth, and that's really good, because I don't think you want to be locked in on one guy and then have to scramble if he chooses somewhere else. Go attack a different guy who you really like and bring him in, and that's what they did. So credit to them for doing that.
Blackie Chan Gaming said Lincoln Riley learned from the Juju situation. So I think he was typing that as I was saying it, and then he said in the chat, like, quit stealing my stuff, Ryan. So I wasn't stealing your stuff, but it's a very good point. Like, I think there were some parallels there.
And then how about learning from the Dylan Raiola situation, where he brings in Dylan Raiola earlier, and it looks like USC was in a good spot. I think Steve Wilfong, when he was working at 24/7, even put in a prediction for Raiola to go to USC. And then that happened really early in the process. More time goes on. It's kind of like Rider Lions in a way. He doesn't seem as locked in with USC, and then it was Georgia, and then eventually it's Nebraska. And then at the end, USC, maybe we'll try to get DJ Lagway. We'll throw a Hail Mary. The Hail Mary in that situation didn't work. The Hail Mary this past year to Hassan Longstreet did work. I don't think you want to be in the business of throwing Hail Marys at the end of these recruiting cycles. You got to go and lock down these quarterbacks earlier, sign a growth, which is what USC did. And they landed a really good quarterback in Jonas Williams. Just turn on the film. The guy is electric. He is really fun to watch. If Lincoln Riley wants him, that's good with me. We all know his history at quarterback. He fits that classic guy who can move around, like a Caleb Williams, like a Kyler Murray. We'll see what he turns into. But I'm excited that if he ever takes over, Ryan, when Lincoln Riley's here, we won't have to hear the fans say, they need a running quarterback that, it doesn't fit the system. This is a system fit, too. So a lot to like with it for sure.
Yeah, we had a comment in the chat. I'll put it up there. If you're watching on YouTube, we are live on YouTube. Thank you for joining us again, because we had that little snafu. He says, we all thought a year ago Malachi Nelson would be in the picture. Yeah, like you just don't know. And I think having the opportunity to play in the spring gives the coaching staff a lot of information about where these guys are. A Rider Lions, like, if his brother Walker, to his credit, still was seeing, started a couple games, right? After with the injuries there. So I think he was able to come in, but it's not the quarterback spot. Like, you really want to be able to run the offense and everything. So I don't think a fall camp before 2027 would be enough time to sort of take things over. So I don't know if you get a true evaluation of him until, the end of that season, but the coaches will be able to see these other guys, and the other guys see what's happening too. I think a guy like Malachi Nelson, it just wasn't working out. I think he could probably see it. He wasn't going to play. I think the coaches could see it. You end up somewhere else. He goes to Boise, transfers out. It doesn't play there. Well, did he play a little? I don't think he did.
As a backup, but he didn't start a game.
So yeah, you just don't know. But spring ball is really important for QB evaluations, because they just get a lot of information of what these guys have.
That's why it's significant that Hassan Longstreet will be here this spring for USC. That'll be great. I don't know how much we'll be able to watch. It sounds like not much, so I don't think we'll be able to see him throwing the ball, unfortunately, maybe in warm-ups if we're allowed in for the warm-ups, but I don't think we'll see too much live action. I'm excited to get an update on what USC is going to do at the end of spring practice, Ryan, because it's not going to be the spring game as we learned last week, and we can talk about that. We missed the show.
I totally forgot about that. I just put it in our notes, so that'll be something we'll talk about too.
Will we see Hassan Longstreet throw a competitive pass? I certainly hope so, but just the fact that he is there is big, and he's going to be locked into a backup quarterback battle with Sam Heward. It's going to be those two guys competing to back up Jade Maiava, and if Maiava doesn't have as good of a spring as he would hope, or as the USC coaching staff would hope, I don't think he did enough last season to surely lock down that starting job. The quarterback spot at USC could get interesting, so we'll see.
We will see. Let's talk on the other side of the ball. I was listening. So on the two-star composite recruiting podcast, Gerard was saying that, as a rush end, there's some potential there, but he feels like frame-wise could add some weight and be in like a 3 technique kind of guy. So there's that projection there. But I don't know, what what were your thoughts on this whole recruitment? Getting a local kid like that helps a lot.
Well, Greg Biggins is very high on Simote Katoanga. He wrote that scouting report on him for our site, which was very detailed and very good. So I recommend you check that out. Subscribe to our site, uscfootball.com. But yeah, that was one of the biggest things that I took from it. Most people in that scouting space expect Katoanga. He's 240 right now. I don't know how it's possible to add 50 pounds with ease, but that's what everyone says about this guy. He could add 50 pounds with ease and still be just as athletic, and the future for him seems to be in the middle. And I like what Gerard had to say on the Two-Star podcast. This recruitment was a barometer for USC in the 2025 class. A local kid, a kid with connections to USC, a kid at a position of need, that middle of the defensive line. Other schools will be all over him. And the Trojans got this one done. Last year, Noah McHale was that barometer, and he signed with Texas A&M. So that's another big sign of progress. There's a long way to go, of course, until signing day. But I just like, Ryan, these commitments now just seem so much more secure to me than a year ago when Justice Terry and Isaiah Gibson committed. And it was like, what was the connection to USC? I guess Eric Henderson knew Isaiah Gibson's high school coach, but like, these just seem much more likely to stick. I mean, R.J. Sermons, unless there's a coaching move, like if Doug Belk were to leave or something, I feel like he is locked in. And Xavier Griffin, I know he's in Georgia, but every time he posts on social media, he's wearing USC stuff. Chris is very close with his camp. He seems locked in. Katoanga, he'll be getting advances from other schools for sure, but if USC can continue to do what they're doing with this new personnel staff, he feels locked in. Brandon Lockhart feels locked in to me. Brandon Jones feels locked in. Sean Alston feels locked in to me. Jonas Williams feels locked into me. And all of a sudden, that's a really good foundation for a really good class. So I think they're in a good spot. The one thing going forward that I think is going to be interesting to monitor, Ryan, when an Ohio State, when a Texas, when an Oregon really wants either one of those guys or someone who USC is going after as well, can USC financially beat those teams? I think right now, the way things are trending, USC has the chance to have a top 5 class. I would go as far to guarantee a top 10 class the way things are going. But to compete in that real, like, number one spot,
rarefied air stuff.
To get to that highest level, we know what it takes, and that's money. And if they can beat some guy, like if they can flip Chris Henry, if they can flip Tom from Oregon, the modern-day defensive lineman, those are sort of the last dominoes for me that need to fall where I say, okay, they're finally competing with the big boys. They have the number 1 class right now. Things are going really well. I'm not trying to discredit anything that they're doing, but I do think there are going to be some NIL battles in the future. And if they do well with those and they even win some of those, then you're cooking with gas. Then the sky's the limit. Then you're in the mix.
For sure, and that's a good segue because I did want to mention, we saw on social media this week that USC put out some, House of Victory videos, and there's a Time to Win is the name campaign, and you see like the place to be LA, PL, the LA being capitalized on place, like the place to be. But they had this campaign, and what USC had put out on social media was it was the most successful day of fundraising in their House of Victory history. So they had a lot of outreach and engagement on their social media posts, and then got the most money they ever had donated in a day. So I think there's some positives there. The fact that you were able to flip a guy from Oregon, even though it's early, I think it's showing signs that, hey, this, and we've been telling you for a while, like money wasn't the problem. It was, who are you recruiting? How hard are you recruiting them? When are you getting them? With strategy and all that. So so that's, I think it's a positive thing, but it looks like this campaign is helping too. So I think the money I was never as worried about. Like, you're probably never going to if Oregon wants to outspend you, like, I don't know if you're going to be able to beat that, maybe for certain guys, but just in general, I mean, Phil Knight can write whatever check he wants, but Oregon also recruits the hell out of everybody, and USC wasn't doing that. And they were doing, the strategy-wise, I liked Oregon's strategy. I think now you like USC's strategy better, and I think they have enough resources that they can implement their strategy. It's an improved strategy.
Antonio Morales wrote this in The Athletic. I thought it was a great point. In the past, USC's had Dante Williams. They've had Eric Henderson, great recruiters, but then there's not really much else there. Now you have Eric Henderson, who's known as a great recruiter. He's, of course, still there, but like by bringing in Chad Bowden, that guy's known as a hell of an evaluator, a hell of a recruiter. And he brings in Dre Brown from Illinois, who was at Notre Dame before with Bowden. He's known as a great recruiter. And then the Wisconsin general manager, he's known as this great up-and-coming recruiter. And Doug Belk, we see what he's done in 2026. I think he's the number one ranked recruiter in 2026 right now. So all of a sudden, it's not just one guy in Henderson, one guy in Dante Williams, like, okay, that guy's the recruiter of the staff. It's more of a team effort. And yes, money will play a big part in things. We can't ignore that. But to your point, Ryan, about the strategy, like, it's night and day. It's totally different. They have a lot of guys on this staff, Trevon Reed, the new cornerbacks coach, who are going to be really good recruiters, and I think that was missing. Chad Savage, I need to talk about him too. Like, there's name after name of guys who are known as relentless recruiters, and I don't think you've been able to say that about a USC program for a long time. No,
like a Chad Savage, like, was his primary recruiting base was Southern California. It just seemed like you needed some direction. Like, I'm not saying all the recruiters were bad, but it was more of like a rudderless ship, and there was like, what's the strategy? Yeah. You want to go after like big name guys in Georgia and get them, and you get a good social media run for a few weeks while you have them, and then they leave, and you don't ever replace them with anybody nearly as good. Now it looks like they have a real strategy. Like, they're attacking Southern California. Like, Notre Dame wanted a bunch of these guys that USC was sort of wishy-washy on, and Notre Dame went to the national championship. Like, those are the kind of guys that Chad Bowden saw with the Fighting Irish have success. And now he's at USC like, hey, we win with those dudes at Notre Dame. You can win with them here. And they're in your backyard. You're not like going thousands of miles to try to recruit them.
Really makes you think what the hell was going on before. Why does the Notre Dame general manager come in and say, hey, we made it to the national championship with guys like of this profile. You should recruit them. I don't know why that's what it took, but hey, the right thing is happening now. Let's just throw this against the wall, Ryan. So in 2026, I think we all agree they're going to have a good class. With this group of personnel, people, and staff members, even if Danton Lynn were to leave, like, I just feel like they have the right people in charge to replace people who were to leave. I feel like they should have a good class in 2027. What are we looking at for this upcoming season? I think the spring portal is going to be huge. Like, how much leeway is there if there is another disappointing year where it's like, okay, everything else is in place. We're finally stacking classes. That 2026 class, that's a championship caliber high school class, but the last 3 seasons of on-the-field results haven't been good enough. I think there does have to be some sort of a give and take where if the results aren't there for this upcoming season, like, we got to start to ask some questions about the coaching staff, and that's going to be fascinating. So I do think there's a lot of pressure going into this season for a lot of these coaches, and if USC does have a good year, then they'll be able to keep that 2026 class and see what it can do. But I don't think all of a sudden, like, this new staff just buys everyone a bunch of time all of a sudden. Like, I think this is a big upcoming season, and if USC is disappointing again, like, that could really deter a lot of this positive momentum. So the stuff on the field has to matter. That has to be a big part of this, and it just hasn't been good enough the past 2 years. Hopefully it can this year, and then they can continue to build. But like, I think we can't lose sight of that. Like, everything that's good that's happening in February is good, but the most important stuff needs to be on the field. So let's not forget about that.
You have to win
on the roads, especially too.
Just win freaking football games. Don't lose to Maryland. Don't lose to Minnesota.
People are going to be mad you brought up the Maryland game every week.
Too bad. You have to win. Now, these are all positive things, and if you're going to have long-term success, you need to have. Yeah. They needed to recruit locally more. Like, why did you need a kick in the ass to recruit? Whatever. Now you got a recruiting staff. You have the personnel staff. It's a new era of college football, and I think USC's been slow to adapt to major changes. There have been more major changes in the sport in the last 5 years than there have been in the previous 100. You know, it's a completely different looking sport than it was before, and USC traditionally just hasn't been quick to adapt to these changes. I think they're now up to speed with where things are going. The last piece is win the freaking games. Like, you have to do that. If you invest all this money and you're a horse trainer and you buy this horse that from a Triple Crown winner, like bloodline, and you get the best feed and like the best training, and you're going and building up the right races, everything that you need to do, and you go out and you finish like 7th, like, that's not good enough. Like, you invest a lot into that horse, it's got to win. USC's invested a lot into this horse. Like just to get Lincoln Riley, you thought that was enough. And then you realize like, whoa, that isn't. Now you're invested a whole bunch around him too. Everything is in place to have success. But the proof in the pudding and all that's on Saturdays. You got to go win the game. So there's good momentum now. Great momentum, you could say. But if you go out and lay a bunch of eggs in the fall of 2025, I don't know what you have to scratch your head, because you're like, we couldn't spend more money, we couldn't invest more, we couldn't have put more effort into building up everything we needed to build to have this team be successful. And then you got to look at the top. Lincoln Riley would have everything you could possibly need. You would think you or me could head coach this team and win the freaking
I don't know about that.
With all the stuff around him. So, I mean, I think they're going to win games, but you have to go out and win games. There's not there's ever even excuses, but if there's very few of them left. Like you just you couldn't ask for anything more. Go win games.
I want to ask you this too. So when Lincoln Riley was hired, they have the really good first year, and then of course it ends not the way you would have wanted, but it's like night and day from the year before, and it looks like there's tangible progress. Things are good. And then the last 2 seasons, of course, were not what people had hoped. And I think it's true that Lincoln Riley, it's definitely true. Lincoln Riley inherited a bad team, a not very good situation, and that is true. I also think it's true, like, if he had come in after that first year and really banged the drum and said, look, college football is changing. We need to be more proactive with NIL. We need to do more stuff on the cutting edge to get recruit. Like, if he banged that drum and he asked the athletic director, Mike Bone, if he asked Carol Folt, if he was really a trendsetter and really was pushing to try to do different things on the recruiting trail to keep up with the Ohio States, to keep up with the Alabamas, it sounds unrealistic, but I think he's so powerful that if he had sort of noticed the way things were going and he started to bang the drum for more NIL money and just recruiting in a different way and trying to get everyone on board, like, don't you kind of think people would have fallen in line and they could have recruited better earlier? Like, the one thing that bothers me is it's like, oh, he was hamstrung by the administration. There was nothing he could do. USC was never going to pay. Like, yes, in a way he was hamstrung by the administration a little bit. They were fearful of some past issues that they had that stemmed from what happened with Reggie Bush. But I kind of think if he had pushed a little harder or pushed at all, they wouldn't have had to do all this in 2026, and now you're kind of coaching for your life this season. And if it goes poorly, like, we'll see what happens after the offseason. Like, I think there were some excuses that he was given, and they're totally fair, but I also push back on, he inherited this awful thing, like, it needed to take this long to be good again. I totally disagree with that.
I'm on the same page, too. I mean, yes, like, Mike Bone was not big on pushing the NIL boundaries. From what we've heard, Carol Folt wasn't. I think she's come a long way since then. Jen Cohen is, 1,000,000% behind, like, paying players, all that. Like, there's no question that her and her staff know that this is all in on NIL, and you need that. But I think Lincoln Riley, too, was sort of reluctant. We had heard things about overpaying a player and what it does to the locker room. It's, I don't want to, you're not, blaming people, but when the world changes, when something major changes, it's hard to adapt. Like when, 9/11 happened, it's like life was different, just going to the airport or whatever you were going to do. After the pandemic, like, things had changed. Like your life is different, and sometimes people adapt to it really easy. If you were like an introverted person, you were totally happy being at home, working from home. If you were like a super outgoing person and you had to not go into the office and you weren't talking to people at the water cooler and stuff, it was probably a bigger adjustment. Some people just adapted to this new era of college football where players getting paid and all that stuff, and others didn't. I think Lincoln Riley was a little, slower to adapt to it too, but I'm not blaming anybody. It's just the world changed. Like, the game that you were playing, all the rules changed significantly, and some people are just good at seeing it. And I think if you like the changes, and I think a lot of the SEC schools, like in Oregon, like when money was there for players anyway, you're cool with it. Like, you can move forward. And if you weren't, you're more reluctant to go through. And any reluctance was going to put you way back. Like, you needed to be on the forefront, like, ahead of this wave. And the reluctance, the wave's gone and another wave goes, and then you finally start catching in. The fact that, I mean, USC's involved House of Victory in recruiting like less than a year. Like they weren't even involved in the process of recruiting high school players until that lawsuit, the court case down in Tennessee. So that it was just that reluctance on everyone's part. But you're right. If Riley had a different vision and was like, look, everybody, this is the only way we're going to compete is this, go into Bone's office, like boom, boom, boom. I don't think he was like that, but I just think the culture around USC just wasn't like that. So it was slow, but now I think he's on board now, but I think he needed some outside, eyes on this problem too, and getting the personnel staff that they have. I think all of that is helping to sort of be like, no, this is the way it's working out in the real world. You need to do this. You need to do that. And to their credit, they're all doing it. And then having Jinho in there too, who knows her stuff when it comes to this stuff. She's all in on it. There's no holding back. Any battle she has to fight within the university about paying these guys, she's fighting it. So I think now we're finally seeing everyone on the same page. It's just like a Texas A&M, I think, was like this on day one when they saw players getting paid. It took USC a few years to sort of like, okay, we're all in on paying these guys. So you fall behind a little bit when that happens.
Yeah, and it's not like I'm not trying to say, oh, he really massively messed up and he should have done all this stuff differently. Like, I do think if he made some changes earlier, then they would be in this position beforehand. Like, it just seems I'm very happy that this is happening now and that they seem to be on a good path. There is a realistic case, though, where they need to win this year for him to be able to see all this through, I think.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's crazy to say. Whereas if they were a little bit early to some of this stuff, maybe he was able to buy himself some more time. But that's what makes this upcoming season so fascinating. And, like, that's why nationally, like, you see Josh Pate say USC, they're building this great recruiting base and they're going to have a chance to be really good. And then you see on ESPN, Adam Rittenberg says, USC's sliding. Like, we'll see what the future looks like. Like, I think in the USC bubble right now, it's all good vibes and the recruiting is good and everything's going to be coming up great. But, like, on the outside, there are still some questions. And, like, it goes back to what I said earlier. You still have to win on the field.
Yeah.
And once you start winning on the field, that just makes everything so much better, where then the recruits don't have the negative people in their ear like, oh, USC, they haven't won the last couple of years. Like, winning cures all. And so this is like, you need to recruit to win. I understand that, but, like, everything that's happening right now and, like, for 2026, that doesn't necessarily help you in the fall. The fall is going to be massive.
Yeah. We had a question in the chat. If you do have questions in the chat, I'll star them and we'll get to them a little bit later. But Joey says, wait, you have to report NIL deals now? Not until July 1st. So, and it's not even been cleared yet, but the House settlement that they're trying to, like, ratify, and if it becomes like the law of the land, which a lot of people are hoping it will, then there'll be a clearinghouse for all NIL deals. It could invalidate certain deals. You could get punishments for schools. Will that have, there'll be legally challenged. We don't know if it's going to happen, but we should know, I think in April, it will be finalized. And then starting in July, then all the NIL deals would have to go through this clearinghouse and be approved. So if it's just pay for play and some school is like, here's $1 million to come play for us, you'd have to do it sort of the way USC's doing it, where they're going to do appearances or whatever you got to do and make it show that the value is there for how much you're getting paid. What schools are doing, and USC included, is you're front loading pay for this 2026 class before the rev share thing comes in. So if you tell someone, if Jonas Williams were coming in and USC, I don't know what they offered him, but if they said, we're going to give you $1 million to come play for USC, they could do that before July 1st, and it's not part of a clearinghouse. You don't need to worry about all the other stuff. After that, if this, the House settlement is ratified or whatever the term is, then you can't just say, here, Jonas Williams, here's $1 million. Here's $1 million because we're going to put your face on this billboard like a Juju Watkins, or you're going to do this car commercial, whatever it is. Then it has to be more like sort of real NIL, unless if you're paying from the athletic department rev share, which is going to be limited. You're probably going to get like $15 million budget for football-ish when you're all said and done. 15 to 18 is the numbers I've been hearing mostly. But if you're going to pay beyond that, then those deals have to be like real. So it might be a strategy thing where, say your quarterback, if you have a 5-star quarterback or whatever, a star quarterback on the team, you don't need to. He probably wouldn't need to get money from USC's revenue share. That is just, you can pay whatever you want, because you could probably get him a real NIL deal in Los Angeles, commercials or whatever it's going to be. So if he needs like a $2 million thing, you could probably get that in actual real NIL deal. So those would pass this clearinghouse. And then maybe your like center that wouldn't be getting as many real NIL deals, but he's like an All-American center, you could give him a bigger chunk of that budget from the athletic department. So there's going to be some weird games being played throughout all this.
I think the clearinghouse is going to be struck down in court. Like,
Very well could,
I feel like that. I think the better way to go is, I'm trying to find the article, I can't find it, but Ross Dellinger wrote about how some athletic directors are trying to have someone put in power, like a commissioner and a governing body, to police. Like, they're pretty much trying to put in a salary cap without putting in a salary cap.
Right.
And I think that's the better way to go. If everyone votes for a governing body to govern you, then like good. Like, then that really can't be struck down in court. Whereas I feel like the NCAA saying, okay, well, we have this big settlement and then there's a clearinghouse for NIL deals. Like, the second the clearinghouse says this is not a good NIL deal, you can't pay this player this much money, they'll take him to court. And then has the NCAA ever won one of these? Like, I think
no.
It'll be another loss. So I don't really see that working out very well, but there's a reason that this has been in talks, and that's the plan. Like, I'm sure some people think it'll work. I think the better way to go about it is what Ross Dellinger on Yahoo Sports discussed, where I don't know how it will all work, but everyone, maybe it's just Big Ten, SEC, maybe it's just the Power 5, whatever, or Power 4, they all vote for a governing body, a commissioner, someone to police everything. And then I don't know how much power that group would have, but at least, like, if you get taken to court, it would hold up because you voted for this, where this settlement is just a law that can, if it's not constitutional, it'll be struck down.
Yeah. So we'll see. I mean, there's way above our pay grade. They're trying to decide all this stuff. I think the conferences are going to be a big part of it. So Tony Petitti, Greg Sankey, they come together, figure out some stuff, and then they become like the governing body. Like, we need a czar over the whole thing, but you have these fiefdoms, like the Big Ten doesn't want to give up power, the SEC doesn't want to give up power, and everyone under them. So we'll see kind of what happens, but that should all be happening in the next couple of months. We'll know what the real rules are as far as NIL goes in college sports going forward. One of the other trends in college sports is people getting rid of spring games. I wrote about it a little bit in the War Room last week. There's certainly concerns, even in Nebraska that gets 70,000 people for their spring game, getting rid of theirs. I think Sark in Texas USC got rid of their spring game. There's worries about, negative recruiting. Like, a place like LA, like, are you going to get 60,000 people to come out to a spring game? No, you get like 20 or 25 or something. But, if Nebraska's recruiting against you, like, look at our spring game, that's something you can use to negatively recruit. Nebraska was worried about scouting because there could be tampering, and you're just looking at the players. The way that this is trending is spring games are going to go away. I don't know if spring football in general is going to go away. I think college football's calendar is pretty messed up, Connor, with way too much stuff happening in December. I think you got to spread it out. Spring is a fun thing. Spring football is a fun thing. If they go to like OTAs in July or something, I'm not sure that's going to be as cool. I would like to see spring football stay. But right now, the trend will be spring football games going away. And then long term, and maybe not that long of a long term, maybe spring practices going away. But any thoughts on that?
I like the spring game because it gives fans a way to connect with the team. It's not as expensive as a regular game. It's just fun to see everyone on the roster play for the most part. So I always enjoyed them. I understand the tampering aspect, and like, if you're a backup on Nebraska and you have a good spring game, you'll come be a starter for us. We'll pay you all this money. And every coach says that's happening, so I'm not trying to say that's not happening. I bet it is. But, like, if you're a backup somewhere, everyone knows you're a backup. Like, in practice, you're still with the twos. And if you're with the twos, you're probably not going to be a starter. And I don't know if you're with the twos and you have a great spring game, does that get you with the ones? Like, I just think guys are going to transfer no matter if there's a spring game or not. Will it diminish tampering a little bit? Yes, it sounds like, but I don't know. I think these coaches just want so much control, and like, who are the biggest controlling coaches in college football? Like Matt Rule is right at the top of the list. He controls all that stuff. Lincoln Riley.
Paranoia runs rampant with college football coaches.
Yeah, so like
they're paranoid of everything.
I think it is an issue. Otherwise, we wouldn't see these changes. But like needing to cancel a spring game because you're so worried about one of your backups being poached by another team, like, I don't know. I'm sure that does happen, but I kind of feel like they're making a mountain out of a molehill a little bit. Like if a school wants to tamper with a player, they're going to tamper with a player. If a guy's a backup, he knows he's a backup. A spring game doesn't change that fact. He could still look for other opportunities. So I kind of think these games are just going away because the coaches want them to, and it's disappointing.
Yeah, you have a disappointing season, and you see coaches do this all the time. Like they do stuff that's like so small, like, oh, we're not going to allow media to watch practice. Like, oh, you'll win 3 more games because of that, coach. You know, like, sure, or we're going to get rid of the spring game. Well, that's what was holding you back. That's why, I'll mention it again. That's why you lost to Maryland, because you had a spring game that was not well attended. Yeah, I think those are the sort of things where, you know what would have helped? Like recruiting Southern California for the last couple of years would have helped. Not canceling the spring game. Like you're not winning a whole bunch more, but there's a high, and it's not just Lincoln Riley. I mean, there's just in college sports, there's this high level of paranoia of everything that could possibly go wrong. And I get it. You want to give yourself, every advantage, but if you're worried about stuff that might give you like a decimal point advantage in something versus like big picture things, like what USC did to the defensive staff last year, or some of the, assistant coaches they've hired this year, bringing in like a Rob Ryan, getting the personnel staff in place with Chad Bowden and all those guys, like that can have bigger results. That's like winning extra games, more than one game, not decimal point stuff, which is like, okay, get it. Like maybe someone saw something and had an idea on a play or recruited a player away from you. Like, I mean, I think that stuff is like, if you're worried about that too much, then you're losing big picture stuff. And I think USC's kind of got too involved in that. Too many big picture things were getting overlooked when you were worried about all these little details, because people tend to do that when you're losing. Things aren't working, and you kind of reach out to things like, we're going to do that differently. I'm like, well, that's not going to move the needle. Like the big picture stuff is going to move the needle. So focus on that more. That's just my opinion.
I also wonder too if the whole sport could use a calendar change, where Jed Fish brought this up. Like if we want to be like the NFL, let's be like the NFL, where the portal is open for the whole month of April, and then maybe spring practice is like May 15th into June, and then the season just gets pushed back so it adheres more to the semesters. Like that's a big issue right now. Oh, the portal has to be in December because guys have to enroll by January. What if there was just one window and then you push spring practice back so you get all the new players and they can still do spring practice, push the season back a little bit, and then the season stretches more into that second semester a little bit? Like either the guys are student athletes or they're not. And right now I feel like they're not really being treated like them. Like,
yeah,
you have to adhere to these student athlete rules, but then in every other situation, you don't have to adhere to them. Where if the calendar changes, it would just be a lot easier for these players, and that could be something to look at. I can't think of it like outside of pushing stuff back. I can't, like, maybe you don't want to get too close to the NFL draft, and there's all that pre-draft stuff. Like you can't push the season back that far, of course. But like just off the top of my head, what if the portal was open from April 1 to the end of April? You did spring practice for a month in May. You have June off, you have July off, you fall camp August, and then like just push everything back a little bit. Doesn't that make kind of sense a little bit?
Yeah.
Or am I talking out of my
No, the calendar's screwed right now. I hate signing day should be February. Like just do that.
Yeah.
Have something
Keep
early.
signing day February,
Yeah.
and then the portal in April.
Yeah, and like too much is going on in December all in the same freaking week. Like stop. Like you just need to, Roger Goodell would never let that happen in the NFL. He's trying to take over every single day of the calendar, and college football is like, let's do free agency in the middle of like the playoff race. It's like you would never do that kind of stuff. So, in the draft and everything all at once. So yes, they need to change some of that, and we'll see. I mean, hopefully there's some positive changes coming. The sport's changed a lot, and I think there's unintended consequences a lot of times. So like an April portal window, I like that. I'd rather have signing day in February. You kind of settle things down. All the coaches have moved, and where you're signing. You know who's going to be there. Like your coach probably isn't leaving after February signing day. In very, very rare cases where when you sign in December, like, at least 25% of the people, like they're losing coaches. I mean, I would be willing to bet like half the players that sign in December have a different coaching staff than what they signed with. Like by the time,
or a different position coach at a minimum.
Yeah, like somebody on the staff is different. It could be a head coach, it could be the coordinator's gone, or one of the assistants is gone. Yeah, and now with more assistants too, like I'm sure a lot of those guys have left. Before we get into the questions, real quick, I wanted to talk about, you gave the top 10 PFF grades for offense and defense. I was looking at the offensive side. 7 of the top guys are gone. I think you have Mekhi Lemon, Jacoby Lane, and Mayava back. On the defensive side, there's a few more, but a little concerning that there's not a lot of the best offensive production coming back, although Mekhi Lemon was the number 1 ranked guy.
Well, take PFF grades with a grain of salt, because if you look on the defensive side, Easton Mascarenas-Arnold, Mason Cobb, Achille Arnold, they were all 3 of the lowest graded players for USC, and they played the 3 most snaps on the team, I think. So, like, you can have really important guys who just might not grade out as well. Of course, in an ideal world, your best players will grade out better, but, like, I don't think that those 3 guys were as bad as their grades seem. Like, USC really needed those players. But, yeah, looking at the offensive list, so number 10, Kyron Hudson, he's gone. Number 9, Emmanuel Prignon, he's gone. Number 8, Jonah Monheim, he's gone. Number 7, Jacoby Lane, he'll be back. That is exciting. Number 6, Deuce Robinson, he's gone. Miller Moss is gone at 5. Quentin Joyner at 4 is gone. Jade Mayava at 3 is gone. And then Woody Marks at 2 is gone. And then Mekhi Lemon is back. So the offense just looks totally different, Ryan. Like we said a couple weeks ago on our show when we did the 3 things we're excited about, the 3 things we're nervous about, I think USC's done a great job of replacing its running back, so I'm not really concerned about the running backs. Mayava's back at quarterback. You have your top 2 receivers back. Very concerned about the offensive line, so we'll see how those guys grade out. And then defensively, Nate Clifton is gone. He was 10. Desmond Stevens is 9. He only played, I think, 105 defensive snaps, so the fact that he played so little and had a good grade means he should have a good second season. So excited for him at linebacker alongside Eric Gentry. Number 8, Zion Branch, he's gone. Number 7, Sam Green, defensive end, he's gone. Number 6, defensive lineman Gavin Meyer, he's out of eligibility, he's gone. Number 5, Cameron Fountain, he's back, the edge rusher, that's exciting. Number 4, Greedy Vance, your nickel corner, he's gone. On to the next level. Number 3, Kamari Ramsey, USC did a nice job of keeping him, so he'll be back, that's a big one. Number 2, Jalen Smith, he's off to the NFL. And then number 1, Eric Gentry, he's back, but you got to be worried about his concussion issues. He was so good in those first 4 games for USC before getting hurt. It's a little bit of a mixed bag, and I think coming into this season, Ryan, there are some building blocks. The USC has some pillars, some guys you're really excited about, but then we see they have some work to do in the spring portal. They still have some holes on this roster that if they really want to compete at the level they want to compete at, I think it's imperative that they add some guys. Yeah, I agree with you there. All right, well, let's take a quick break. We'll come back and do questions, everybody. Back in a sec. All righty, we're back here on the Peristyle Podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, there was no break, but we do a little break for the podcast listeners so we can pay a few bills. I do want to give a shout out before we get into questions. I forgot to mention Doug Belk, the number 2 ranked recruiter. Oh, he slipped to 2. He was number 1 earlier. Yeah, I believe he's number 2 right now. Okay. But cool for Doug Belk, USC secondary coach, doing work out there on the recruiting trail. He has done an awesome job. RJ Sermons, the cornerback from Rancho Cucamonga, he just keeps vaulting up all the rankings. So he is that premier corner for USC, but Brandon Lockhart's been in the fold for a while. Doug Belk keeping him in there is big. Madden Reardon, same with him. Josh Holland is a guy who wouldn't be here without Doug Belk. So he's doing a really nice job with cornerbacks. I'm sure he'll want to add a safety or 2, and that'll be on his list. But he's off to a great start in 2026. Let's go to voicemail. Our buddy Curtis called in.
Ryan, I had to call this recruiting news. We got a 4-star quarterback from Oregon, and we flipped him. Why don't you flip some linemen? We need people to block. We got pushed around all last year. A quarterback ain't going to help that. We already got a 5-star. It's going to probably beat out Mayava because he throws so many picks. But remember, bad line. We need linemen. Wait, I said we. I'm still in the transfer portal. But I am upset that we're so excited about a 4-star quarterback. Get some linemen, Curtis from Moreno Valley.
I was going to say, I thought that at first was going to be a call about how he was so excited, but he's sticking to his guns, man. I love it. He's still in the transfer portal. He still needs to see better on-field results. I agree with Curtis. I need to see better on-field results, too.
They got a defensive lineman we already talked
about.
Yeah,
yeah. Maybe he called before they got Katoanga, but I think they'll do fine. They're going to be in a good spot recruiting in 2026. So they'll get some good offensive linemen and some good defensive linemen. But maybe Tom is the guy at modern day, the defensive lineman who's committed to Oregon. Maybe that's a flip that USC can work on. That seems to be a hot story right now. So we'll see on that. That might make Curtis exit the transfer portal. But I mean,
he left another voicemail earlier. It's still about being in the portal, but I played this. This was the more recent one. I played that. Yeah.
I understand the frustration. I mean, they weren't very good in the trenches last season, especially at the beginning of the year on the offensive line, and then they could never consistently pressure the quarterback. That's probably the biggest thing we'll be watching this season. We all watched the Philadelphia Eagles in the Super Bowl win that game single-handedly almost in the trenches. Like, building from the inside out is the way to do it right now in football, and USC's trying to do it. Let's see how they do.
All right. We got Stephen Poway emailed us. He said, there have been a lot of changes in college football over the past 5 years or so. Some that immediately come to mind are conference realignment, including the Pac-12, 12-team playoff system, NIL, transfer portal palooza, direct communication between coaches and a quarterback and a defensive player on the field through helmets, 2-minute timeout. Which change would you absolutely want to keep going forward, and which change would you like to change back?
Well, I know the change back. In an ideal world, the conferences are back to normal or back to somewhat how they used to be, because I know they've changed around so much. Like, it really makes no sense to be in the same conference as Maryland. It really makes no sense to be in the same conference as freaking Penn State. Like, the matchups are good for football with Penn State, and I mean, the Maryland game was close. They're not exactly a world beater in football, but you know what I'm saying. Like, on paper, a Penn State USC game is pretty fun, but like, there's no reason that they need to be in the same conference. Like, you losing the regionalness. What's the
you want it to be a regional sport, and we've lost that.
Yeah, so that's what I would change back. And what rule do I like?
Either portal or NIL. Like, you can't, like, you need to keep those. Like, during direct communication, that's fine, but I don't think it's the 2-minute timeout. Those aren't as impactful as even the 12-team playoff. Like, you can't go back from NIL or transfer portal stuff. Like, you can tweak them, but I think those are necessary going forward.
I like that the clock winds after you get first downs outside of under 2 minutes. So I'm a fan of that rule.
I didn't really care. Like, I like the college timing rules more. But
I get that too, but the games are just so damn long.
Yeah, that's true. When we're in the press box at like 1 a.m, then I'm like, what's going on here? But I think that's just, you could cut some commercials back, but you're never going to do that.
In an ideal world, though, the SEC makes the same amount of money or close to as every other conference, and the fact that there's 2 power conferences. Like, what's going to be the situation 5 years from now? Like, I feel like eventually it's going to be one super conference. It's the haves and the have-nots.
Yep.
The beauty of college football is that the have-nots have a chance. Like Boise State upsetting Oklahoma in that awesome Fiesta Bowl. Like, that's what makes the sport great. That's probably the best thing about the sport, and I feel like they're losing sight of that. I get the money piece. Like, you got to make money. It's capitalism. That's the name of the game. Money is really important, but, like, I don't know. It's hard when there's so many teams because, like, USC will never be on the same.
They're not going to be a have-not ever.
Exactly. Yeah. And what's a good example of like a team that will never be a have? Like a Mercer.
Yeah.
A team like that. But there should be a way to make the power conferences more even. But we're just going down this road where if you make the most money, you just make the most money, and you're just going to be the best. Like, I do want there to be a level playing field somehow. I'm glad I'm not in charge because I don't know how to do that. But I don't want there to be a world where you have no chance of winning the championship unless your team, a handful of teams. And you could argue that that's the case right now, I guess. So maybe I'm arguing a bad point. But no, I just want it to be more open.
And if you went to an NFL model and you were only playing each other, like there are a lot of teams in the NFL that win like 2 games a year, like there's not, and you can go from Patriots dynasty to being terrible, like back and forth.
Yeah.
You're not used to that. Like you're used to like Alabama's had bad years, not in the last 20 or whatever, but they had some really bad years. All these programs have had bad years, but nothing like you would if you were bad in a super league, because then you're like everybody's beating you and you don't have any Mercers on the schedule to win if you're only playing like NFL model. So that would be an adjustment. Like losing, Alabama going 10-3 or wherever they were this year was like a disaster. But in a new world where you're playing only tough teams all the time, 10-3 might be the best record in the league. Like you're not going to have 15-0, 16-0 kind of teams if you're only playing each other and they're all good. So be careful what you wish for if we go that way.
Yeah, I just don't know what the fix is. Maybe it's always been the case where only a handful of teams can win, but it just seems like if you're in the Big 12, you're screwed. Maybe you've always been screwed. But before they had Texas and Oklahoma, like it was more fun when you had USC in the Pac-12. Like they have a chance to be really good, and Texas and Oklahoma in the Big 12 have a chance to be really good, and then Ohio State. Like it's fun when it's more regional. So.
I mean, the Big 12 is a super fun league right now. Like, you don't know what's going to happen. Arizona State won it. Like, it is a fun league, but there's no blue blood program. They're going to be a power, and you kind of need that. The ACC was, like, bad for a while, but you had Clemson kicking ass. And
Miami should be in the mix.
Yeah, so, like, the Big 12, it's tough because they're not going to have – you could argue this is the most fun league, the most parity. Like, anyone can beat anyone on any given day. But they don't have like a power anymore. And, that's tough too. John in Oakland wrote in a complete hypothetical question. If a change at quarterback from Maava had needed to be made very early in the season for either performance or injury reasons, would Sam Heward be a better option than a real, I think he means true freshman like Hassan Longstreet? Heward was a 5-star and the number 3 quarterback coming out of high school behind Quinn Ewers and Caleb Williams. Would going with him allow the coaching staff to bring Longstreet along under a plan closer to what would happen if he was behind Maava, using the season to get Longstreet comfortable with the playbook and the college game? Are people overlooking Heward's potential? John in Oakland.
Great question. I think it's all dependent on what Longstreet does in spring and fall camp. And if after those 2 camp periods he wins the backup job, like then it'll be decided. The depth chart will tell that story. Whoever wins the backup job will be deemed by the coaching staff to be more ready. And I give Heward a shot for sure. It's hard to be a true freshman and come in and compete against a guy who, Sam Heward, he hasn't had too much success at the college level due to injuries and other factors, but like he was a 5-star prospect in his own right, and he's been in college for 3 or 4 years. Like that's going to be tough for Longstreet to beat him out. So I think that there's certainly a chance Heward is the backup, and if there needs to be a quarterback change, given the roster right now with no new additions or anything, Heward could be that guy if Maava goes and doesn't play very well, if Heward wins the backup job.
Yeah, I put some blurbs in the War Room about him a month or so ago, and one of the sources I talked to was pretty optimistic about, he hasn't really contributed much in college yet, but he has the potential to do so. So it's a little different situation. Maybe not like a Jake Jensen kind of backup. Like I think there's some optimism that if it came down to it, he could come in and play. So I'd be curious to see that backup role and then how good Maava does. Like who knows? He ends up being your starting quarterback. So I think the potential is there.
I do think too that Heward was brought in with the understanding like you're gonna have to really wow us to be the backup. Like it's going to be an open competition, but I do think Longstreet going into this, like the hope is that he wins the job. So with that in mind, we'll see what happens. Ajax
had a question in the YouTube chat. Thank you for that. He says, hello from Texas. Speaking of Texas, thoughts on Boo from DeSoto?
Is that Booby Feaster?
I'm not sure who he's talking about, but
that's the receiver. So I've never seen this guy play. He reclassified to 2026 from 2027, which made him a top 100 prospect in the 247. It's kind of similar to Jakeem Stewart before he was a higher ranked guy. Again, I'm not really able to speak to him. I've never seen him play, but he seems interested in USC, and USC is interested in him, and he could certainly be a part of the 2026 class. Outside of that, I don't have much else to say. He has a lot of really good offers. He's highly ranked. He seems like a really good receiver.
All right. Our buddy Blackie Chan Gaming has a question. Buy or sell? Lincoln Riley signs over 70% of USC recruits are from California in 2026.
Sell. I think 50-50 is the sweet spot. I think 70 is a little high.
Yeah, I could see it being the 60-ish range, but 70 is a lot. Where are they at right now? Like it's like 50-50-ish? Or
it might be closer to that. So they have 11. They got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 out of 11. So that is close to 70%.
Not quite. But
I think they're in on a lot of California guys, but maybe 60-40. I think 70 is too high.
Okay. Yeah, I would go more in the 60 range. And then we got one last one. Is there any belief that collective bargaining will limit tampering?
Yes, that's my belief. But
you'd have contracts, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, but do you want to go that route? Because then that changes everything. If there's collective bargaining, there might be
employment.
Chance that
contracts.
The TV money goes to some of the players too. So that is crazy. I mean, when I'm crossing sports, but when the Knicks signed Jalen Brunson or traded for Jalen Brunson, however that worked.
Is it Dallas or what?
Yeah, from Dallas. They got in trouble for tampering and they lost their second-round pick. Like, just because there is collective bargaining doesn't mean there won't be tampering. But we won't see an Emmanuel Pregnon situation where you won't be able to just get out of a contract. Like Brunson in that example was a free agent, I think. So they just tampered with him before it was allowed to do so. Like if Pregnon had signed a deal with USC to come back next season, you can't just back out of that. And that's kind of why I like the collective bargaining thing. Right now, if a high school kid signs an NIL deal with USC and then flips, USC's not going to sue the kid in court. Like, you don't want to just have that precedent of you suing a high school kid. What recruit would want to play for you, if you sue someone who signed an NIL deal with you and then they go back against that? Collective bargaining, though, would make sure that kid's locked in, and I kind of like that.
I like it, too. I mean, I think it needs more structure because right now, if you were like in the NFL, imagine anyone's a free agent any given day whenever they wanted, and players can just leave.
Yeah.
So the more that we're getting to this model and money's being a bigger part of it, I think contracts have to be in it and players have representation and you're going to make some choices. So, hey, I can sign with USC. It's a 2-year deal worth like $800,000 or something. But Oregon's going to give me $500,000, but they're only signing a 1-year deal or whatever. Like, there could be things like that where do you want stability or do you want the more money short term and you're not sure if you don't perform then you might not get anything the next year, no one signs you. There's a lot of that stuff that kind of have to be decided, but you can't just sign with a school, sign some kind of deal and leave after spring practice, so I think that's what it would give a lot more structure. And if you're good at signing guys, some schools might want to sign guys for 3 years, and if it doesn't work out for the school that's not a great player, you're on the hook for this guy for 3 years. If he's a great player and he would have went somewhere else for a lot more money, you got him. I think that would help the sport a lot since we're paying. You have like 7-figure kind of deals going on, not everywhere, but a bunch of places. Having collective bargaining, having contracts, making it like or actual employment it wouldn't just limit tampering. It would just make the structure of everything so much more stable.
Yes, but then imagine you sign a high school kid for $1 million and then he's a high school kid. He just doesn't work out. It's very risky.
There's risky. Yeah,
it's a fine line. So I think the best way to do it is to probably tie it to either stats or to appearances. So you wouldn't get totally screwed. Okay, this 5-star kid, we're going to sign you for we want you so badly, we're going to sign you for $5 million a year for 3 years, $15 million guaranteed. I don't see anything like that happening outside of the rare case. But if you're a 4-star kid, the hope is that in 3 years you'll be a starter for us. First 2 years we'll pay you X. Once you play more, your pay will, correspond to what you do on the field. And I could see something like that happening. But I mean, they just need leadership. Like they just need someone at the top to be able to enforce rules. And I don't know if that's coming anytime soon. The hope is that these ADs will vote on someone to be in charge, but even that might not be perfect. So I'm just happy I'm not a part of this, because coming up with a solution is going to be nearly impossible. You're not going to make everyone happy, but I do think that improvements can be made that make it better than what it is right now.
Yeah. Get your popcorn ready. Just like sit back and watch. It's just, you have to like, what are the rules going to be now? How is this going to change? And then the hope is whatever. I think USC's got better people in place that if the rules drastically change, they'll adapt quicker now than what they would before. Even I keep bringing this up, like when the early signing period started, USC was focused on February for that year. Everyone else, 80 to 85% of their players were signed in December. And USC was sort of looking around like, what happened? Had no idea that the early signing period was going to be the de facto signing period. Other schools figured it out. USC did not. They were just slow to adapt, and they were that was a bad recruiting year because most guys were already gone, and USC was looking to sign guys in February because that's the way it always been. I think with this staff and with this administration, if in the next 2 months, like a whole new thing happens, employment or whatever, like something crazy in the world of sport,
they'll be ready.
They would be more ready than they would have even a couple years ago.
I'm with you.
Real quick before we go, thanks everyone for sticking with us. I forgot to mention hoops. USC women doing great. They're the number 4 team in the country. They got UCLA this week at Pauley, right?
Yeah, the winner wins the Big Ten. So how about that?
The winner will win the Big Ten. It was weird. I don't know if you know about Northwestern, like was supposed to come out to LA during the fires, and they didn't come. And I don't know if that was their fault or if they didn't want to reschedule or something, but the Big Ten announced, I think it was today, that they're forfeiting the games with USC and UCLA. Now, they would have got slaughtered anyway. It doesn't matter. But that was a weird one. Do you know any of the details behind that? I was like, maybe they tried to reschedule it and they didn't want to come out to LA for it. And so they're like, okay, you're going to forfeit then. I'm not sure.
Maybe. I don't know the exact details. All I do know is that I think USC played Iowa like on the men's side, like either the day before or the day after the women were supposed to come out from Northwestern. Like, I get not wanting to come to LA during that time, but like everything was going on. Like, they definitely could have done it.
It didn't stop the world. Yeah.
So, but I mean, it's hard to penalize them for not coming. Like, I understand it. I also just kind of think Northwestern women's basketball isn't very good. They were like, you don't want to use it as an excuse, but like, do we have to do this? Let's not. And
because they would have got slaughtered.
Yeah,
both teams were like really good,
bottom of the league. So I don't really know why. Like, I guess you need every team to play the same amount of games, but it doesn't really matter because USC and UCLA, regardless of those Northwestern games, like the winner of Saturday's game is going to win the Big Ten, and the loser is going to be the second best team. So like, I don't really know if they needed to implement forfeits. Maybe they're trying to set a precedent for the future, but I don't know if the games were tried to be rescheduled either. It's one of those where like it doesn't really matter because the team stinks so bad, but I don't really have any inside information on that.
Speaking of stinks so bad, what the hell's going on with the men's team, Connor? They're not.
They fell off a cliff. Yeah, so they beat Michigan State, who's ranked at home, on February 1st, and then they've lost 5 of 6 since then. Desmond Cloud got hurt against Michigan State. He's their best player. He missed USC's next 2 games. They lost those 2. Then he came back, and he looks good to me, but like I think that injury sort of corresponded when they lost the season a little bit here, so that's too bad. But I don't know. I think it's certainly fair to wonder what happened and why they haven't been able to weather the storm better, because they were 5-5 in conference at one point. Now they're 6-10. They might not make the Big Ten tournament. If they don't make the Big Ten tournament, that's a massive fail. Yeah,
they were on the bubble of making the NCAA tournament, and now
not even close.
Might not make the Big Ten tournament, which is how many teams are in it?
Got to be in the top 15, and there's a huge logjam from like 12 to like 17. I think that the last place team is pretty comfortably in last, but Yeah, so they have their work cut out for them, and things don't get easier. They play a bubble team in Ohio State tonight, then at Oregon, then against Washington, and then at UCLA. 3 out of their last 4 opponents might be NCAA tournament teams, which is not good. So, yeah, they're at 6-10, and if they were to lose, they'd be in a 4-way tie, lose tonight for that 15th place. So,
wow. Victor, it says, going to the game tonight with 12 of my drunk idiot friends.
Okay.
Delta Chi 12 forever.
I'll be looking out for you.
Shout out to, go say hi to Connor. Say hi. Yeah. But yeah, Ohio State tonight, if you're going to be around, head over to the Galen Center and give them a home field advantage. I know Musselman was kind of complaining about the travel and everything. So we heard Mick Cronin complaining a lot too. So Musselman was just kind of jumping in on that also.
The complaining makes sense, but at the end of the day, like, this is what you signed up for. I think there could have been some accommodations made where USC isn't playing on the East Coast at 6 p.m. Eastern time and then has to fly back in the middle of the night and go to class Monday. Like, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So they could do some scheduling tweaks, but like, you're gonna have to go to the East Coast. You're gonna have to go to the Midwest a couple times. It's not gonna be easy when USC and all those schools did the realignment, joined the Big Ten. Like, this is what it was going to be. So this is, I know Musselman didn't make that decision, but to hear those guys complain, I know a lot of people are like, well, this is, you reap what you sow. This is what you signed up for. And I get it. It's frustrating. It's not a great spot to be, but that's the reality.
You're hopeful that there's learning lessons. You try to go into scheduling all of these other sports and football in a logical way. And there might be things like, hey, this didn't work. This worked well. This didn't. We can tweak this for next year's schedule. So you hope that there were some learning lessons. If anything that was really egregiously bad, you could fix in year 2.
It's just hard because you can't have a totally unbalanced schedule where USC plays the West Coast teams way more than the other ones. I think they already play Oregon, Washington, and UCLA twice, so there's a little bit of that going on. But you can't have them play each other 3 times, and then you don't get a true champion. So again, it's another situation where I'm glad I'm not in charge. Like, you have a lot of money, so use the money to get better players, I guess, and then you can do better with the travel. I don't know.
All right, well, that's going to wrap things up. Hope you guys all enjoyed the show. It was fun talking about USC getting some positive recruiting going on. Talking about Trader Joe's.
Woo!
The fish and chips I made, it was fun. And little disappointing hoops news at the end. But the women, maybe they can win the Big Ten.
I got a future bet on them to win it all, so I hope they win it all.
There you go. Nice. But yeah, that's it's good stuff. Great to see you again, Connor.
Good to see you, Ryan.
We got some stuff coming up with the Pro Day. Hopefully we'll know more about spring practice later in March, and we got a little, get some opportunities to go down to USC and talk to some people. So it should be a lot of fun. But that's going to wrap it up. Mr. Connor Morrissette, triple double. I am Ryan Abraham. Hope you guys all enjoyed the show. And of course, we will talk to you next time.